The gospel reading this morning is brief. It is a conversation between Jesus and the Jews, including religious leaders and the scribes and the Pharisees. The reading begins with the festival of the dedication, also known as Hanukkah. This is the Jewish celebration of the rededication of the temple in Jerusalem. In the year 165 BC, the Jews of Judea were ruled by Greek kings who would not allow them to worship God. They made them worship Greek gods. At the temple, a pig was sacrificed on the altar, and the blood was spilled on the Torah scrolls. So in response to this, a group of men led by Judah Maccabee built an army which became known as the Maccabees. They were small in number, but they had God on their side. In 3 years of battle, they defeated the Greeks. The temple was eventually cleansed, but the eternal flame in the temple had been extinguished. Most of the oil for the eternal flame was defiled. The eternal flame was an important part of their worship, but it would take a week to purify and process new oil. But the eternal flame was lit anyway. It had 1 day's worth of oil. But with God's presence, the flame burned for 8 days, and then the new oil was available. But besides the festival of the dedication, the Jews also celebrate this festival of lights, when 1 day of oil lasted 8 days. So why does the gospel reading start with the festival of the dedication? What is so important? It's important because many more Jews were at the temple to celebrate. So not only could the religious leaders talk to all the people, talk to more people, but so could Jesus. We will now go back to the book of Exodus, chapter 3, in order to explain some of the gospel reading. Exodus is a book of the Jewish Bible. It tells us about when Moses grew up. He saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew. A Hebrew is one of his brethren. He struck the Egyptian and killed him. So out of fear, Moses left Egypt and ended up in Midian, northeast of the Red Sea. He encountered a woman who was trying to water her flock, but some shepherds started to drive her sheep away. But Moses intervened and helped the woman. He even helped her water her flock. Moses was invited back to her father's home, and Moses eventually married the woman. One day, Moses was attending his father-in-law's sheep when he noticed a bush burning, and it wasn't being consumed. God spoke to Moses. He told Moses that he would take the Israelites out of slavery in Egypt. Moses asked God, "What name should I use for you? Should someone ask me?" God replied, "I am who I am." Eventually, that name for God became the Great I Am. Now we'll go back to the book of John, chapter 8, verse 54. This being 2 chapters before this morning's gospel reading. Jesus was speaking to some Jews in the temple area. Jesus said, "My Father whom you claim as your God, is the one who glorifies me. Your father Abraham rejoiced at the thought of seeing my day. He saw it and was glad." The Jews replied, "You are not 50 years old, and you have seen Abraham?" Jesus replied, "I tell you the truth, before Abraham was born, I am." Before Abraham was born, I am. Jesus claimed to be God, and the Jews heard this very clearly, and they knew the meaning of I am because it was from their Bible, from Exodus. They tried to stone Jesus, but Jesus walked away and wouldn't allow a stone to hit him. Back to this morning's gospel. The Jews asked Jesus, "Are you the Messiah? Tell us plainly." The Jews already knew who Jesus was. They heard him say he was God, or I am. So why did they continue to ask Jesus, "Are you the Messiah?" One reason, perhaps, is that they were confused. Jesus often spoke in parables and also called him the Good Shepherd. He did not often call himself God. Another reason, many Jews expected the Messiah to be a political leader and who would free him from the Roman rule, as the Maccabee army defeated the Greeks. And the third reason, Jesus was becoming popular among the Jews and the Gentiles. A group of religious leaders called the Pharisees were concerned about Jesus' popularity. He was becoming too popular, and they were afraid he would be taking away some of their power. So by Jesus saying he is God, they could call it blasphemy, and they could stone Jesus to death. Quoting the gospel this morning, "The works that I do in my Father's name testify to me, but you do not believe because you do not belong to my sheep." End quote. Jesus' sheep are his disciples and his followers, his believers. There is a parable in the book of Luke concerning the religious leaders, the scribes and the Pharisees. And I quote, "No one tears a piece of cloth from a new garment and puts it on an old garment. Otherwise, he will both tear the new, and a piece from the new will not match the old." End quote. The meaning of this parable is that the new cloth, Jesus' disciples and followers, would not be able to bring a religious leader to believe in Jesus. The religious leader is the old garment. If the disciples try to witness to them, their words would fall on deaf ears. The lives of these religious leaders is concerned with the laws that they made, not with the teachings of Jesus, or even the teachings from the Old Testament. There were about 1,500 laws that they created. Examples of these Pharisaic laws. Number one, you could not spit on the Sabbath because it would disturb the dirt, and you would be guilty of plowing on the Sabbath. Another law, you cannot swat a fly on the Sabbath because you would be guilty of hunting. Another law, a woman could not look at her reflection because she might see a gray hair and pluck it out, which would be doing work. And finally, the last example of the laws. If your house was burning down on the Sabbath, you could not carry clothes out of it. However, You are allowed to put on several layers of clothes while the house is burning down. You could leave without breaking the law because you were wearing the clothes instead of carrying them. So ends this morning's sermon.